On today's episode, I am so excited to have Dr. Nekeisha Hammond here. Dr. Hammond is a psychologist, an executive coach, and the author of the USA Today bestselling book, Mindset Training Conquer Your Mind, and the Rest Will Follow. I am so excited to hear her perspective today, her incredible knowledge, and like key tips, tricks, ideas around how do we really work on our mindset in everyday life. So, Dr. Hammond, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to dive right in and kind of start with talking a little bit more about your story. Like, how did you really get started with the work you do? What was your personal experience like? And what led you down the path of diving into psychology, diving into executive coaching, and diving into being an author?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey for sure.
Yeah.
But I really when I reflect, I really think back on my childhood, like growing up, I really didn't recall a time when I had conversations about self-care or conversations about mental health. It seems like back in those days, everything was about a go, go, go mentality. So
Yeah.
everything was about the next achievement. It was like working like a machine almost. And the problem with that is although you can achieve a lot of success that way, and I'm grateful for achievements and success and accolades, but the issue is I never learned how to take care of myself. I never understood the concept of self-care. So fast forward up to today, I'm obviously in the mental health field and I teach burnout prevention to a lot of organizations and corporations. Uh, from the personal experience I have of hitting burnout, but
Yeah.
also learning how to live a more healthy and holistic life so
Right.
that I can really share that experience with others and help them to reset and recharge.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is so crucial. Like you hit the nail on the head. We live in a go, go, go society and
Yeah.
we're super connected, which is such a gift. But there's also this next level of really having to understand how do we create boundaries and how do we
Yes.
really figure out the expectations we need to hold ourselves to, but also do that in a way that keeps our mental health and our self care at the center. So I would love
Yes.
for you to talk a little bit about just kind of your specific mindset towards self-care. You obviously are a thriving entrepreneur. You have incredible work that you're doing. You're writing books, you're building businesses, all of those things. And so
Yeah.
that has a lot of weight to it and there's a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility in that. So I would love for you to maybe speak a little bit about kind of your personal experience and how you've learned to really shape your mindset around self-care and why that matters so much.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really started some years back. As I told you, the beginning couple decades of my life, I did not put focus on self care. But then my son was around 3 or 4 at the time. He's 12 now, and when I hit burnout, and I was just so physically and mentally exhausted from playing a lot of roles, not taking any time for myself. I knew that I had to make a change. I'm like, okay, this I can't sustain who I am this way, and I wasn't liking the way I was showing up because I was just so exhausted. So, what I really started, and this is something I actually preach to a lot of people and teach, is I started taking a minute, like literally 60 seconds a day. Because back then, the story I told myself, which is not true, but I told myself I didn't have time for self care. I was too busy. I was too overwhelmed. But I was like, okay, well, I could take a minute a day. Everyone has a minute. So I started with that, and literally everywhere I went, and I travel a lot for work and a lot of different work projects and businesses that I'm in. And I would be like, okay, let me take a minute to watch the sunset or to step outside or to enjoy a cup of tea or look out the window, on a plane ride or whatever it was, just to make sure that I was really focusing on resetting and recharging. And that's something I still do to this day. I take more than a minute now, but that's
Yeah.
something I really still do to this day because now self-care is at the forefront of my mind. Like you said, it's at the center. And I know in order to do all the 500 things that I'm juggling and all the roles that I play, I have to make sure that I'm taking care of my physical and mental health.
Yeah, and I've learned that same lesson, and I'm so
Yeah.
appreciative when women share their stories around this because I feel like there's a very real element to you kind of have to go through it, and then you
Yes.
start to figure out, okay, that's not really working. I don't feel that great in this process. What do I maybe need to change? How do I need to recalibrate? And what can I continue to do to make sure that I'm really prioritizing me
Yeah.
while I'm executing on all of these different aspects to my life. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more, Dr. Hammond, about when you experienced burnout. and you went through some of these components to your own journey. How did that really affect you personally, professionally, and emotionally? Like, talk about maybe the physical symptoms that you had, or really like what you were experiencing when you reached that point in your life.
Yeah. And it's all about mindset, of course. I'm not just saying this because I wrote the book Mindset Training, but it really is about your mindset. So back then, my mindset was get everything done, make sure it gets done, go hard, hustle hard, team no sleep. Like I had all those types of really unhealthy behaviors. I would choose to get, I mean, sometimes like 2, 3 hours of sleep on purpose because it made sense to me back then to basically ruin my health because I had to get different projects done and all these things done. But what that did over time, it highly not recommended, is to not get sleep, especially. It really tears down your body physically. And I got to the point I was so exhausted and I knew I was like, okay, I can't go on like this anymore. Like it's so unhealthy to do that. Again, highly would
Yeah.
not recommend that. But
Yeah.
those were the behaviors that I was doing because I told myself a story of, I mean, everything I did, I would say, like, okay, I didn't have time. So maybe if I didn't get the sleep I needed, like just skip the sleep or skip the gym or skip all these things that were healthy things for me to be doing. But I told
Yeah.
myself a story that I was too busy for them. And now it's the complete opposite shift.
Yeah.
Those are my non-negotiables now. I have to get enough sleep. I have to be going to the gym. I have to work out. I have to take care of myself. That's the mindset I have now. And I still get
Yeah.
everything done. Anyways.
Yeah.
So it's all about
Yeah.
shifting our mindset and perspective.
I love that. And it's, again, such a powerful reminder of how one really fuels the other. And,
Oh yeah.
in a lot of conversations I have in the coaching practice that I have, a lot of the times, sometimes the mindset is, well, I can't add one more thing to my plate. And I
Yep.
love that you're really speaking about how this is something you integrate into your life. This is something
Yes.
that fuels each other. So we
Yes.
really have to continue to make these mindset shifts around this concept of how do we make sure we're utilizing this as the fire to everything else that we're doing in our day to day. I love
Yeah.
that. It's so good. So
Yeah,
good.
and I did want to share also. So even though I'm in a much healthier place now, sometimes it is still tempting. I'll admit, my brain will go, but if I skip the gym workout, and I'll literally start doing the math. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
an
me
hour
too.
class, 15 minutes, 15. Okay, that's an extra hour and a half, and then I have to challenge myself sometimes. Be like, no, you made this commitment now. That's a very high priority on the list. Go to the gym. I've never regretted it either. It's not like after you work out, you're like, man, I wish I didn't work out. No, you
Yeah,
feel good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like sometimes those temptations come up or like, maybe I could do this. And it's like, no, that's not healthy. Like, do the things that are healthy and
Right.
integrate everything else too. It can work, but you just really have to change your mind mentality.
Yeah, you do have to change your mentality. And I appreciate you normalizing that process because I think we
Oh
all go
yeah.
through that justification of, well, if I just skip this or if I just tweak that, it'll be fine. But at the end of the day, like when we do start to chip away at those health practices, it ends up affecting our everyday life.
It does.
For
It so
sure, for
does.
sure. I'd love for
Yeah.
you to talk a little bit about, so you kind of got into that self-awareness of, I know I need self-care as a part of
Yeah.
my everyday life. And I know that this is the mindset shift I have to make. So as far as the practices you actually use for prioritizing self-care, talk us through that. Is that you schedule time on your calendar, you share it with your family and your coworkers? How do you actually take the steps to prioritize it? And how do you essentially communicate the expectation of what you need to do for you?
Yeah, yeah, and it is. It's definitely a combination of those things. So some practical things that I do now, which I didn't do years ago, is the like even my morning routine. I used to wake up, and as soon as I woke up, I'd be on my phone. I feel within like 30 seconds, it would be, oh, I got to check the email. I got to check social media. I got to do this. It was like that's how I started my day. It was such a rush already, and I just opened my eyes
Yeah.
30 seconds before. But now I'm like,
Yeah.
no, my non-negotiable is I don't touch my phone as soon as I wake up. I wake up, I have a gratitude practice. For me personally, with my spiritual growth, I have a devotional, I'm in prayer, I'm taking deep breaths. That's how I start my day. And that in and of itself, the last couple years has been life-changing for me because I tell myself the story of I wake up, I prioritize my mental health first
Yeah.
before I get to the emails and the whatever, the missed phone calls or whatever it was that's in my phone. because that's not as urgent as my mental health. So that's the
Yeah.
first part of my day. The second thing is, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a communication with my family as well. And just having a lot of talks about self care as a family and what that means and how important it is. Well, each of us have our things, right? How important it is, even as a family, to have our self care time, our time
Right.
for us, our time as a family. Working out now is highly important to me because I know what motivates me really now is that I know that in order to do my schedule, my crazy schedule that I'm doing and all the things I'm working on, I really have to make sure that I'm physically taking care of myself because
Yeah.
I truly believe if I weren't doing that, I mean, I'm like running through airports half the time and just on a plane or what, just a really hectic life. But I have to make sure I'm physically taking care of myself in order to do those things
Right.
and still have the energy that I need. So,
Nice.
so those are just a couple ways. Yeah, those are just a couple of things, but it really is. I've definitely changed, even like you said, like different practices
Yeah.
to make sure that I'm taking care of myself.
Right. So it sounds like morning routine has been pretty profound for you.
Oh yeah, very profound. Yeah, very
And I
profound.
love how you kind of spoke about, making the active choice to be proactive versus reactive.
Yes.
And I've heard people kind of explain it as you either wake up on offense or defense,
Yeah.
and you have to choose to kind of wake up in that space where you're in the offensive position, where you're like
Yes.
making the choices, you're putting yourself
Yes.
first rather than everything's coming at you and now what do I do?
Yes.
And I appreciate how you really broke down the morning routine because that's such a simple practice
It
that I
is.
think can sometimes just be really easily overlooked because we are inundated so
Yeah.
often with
Yeah.
so many different things.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that you shared that. One of the things that I would love for you to speak about, I'm an entrepreneur just like you,
Yeah.
busy, crazy, unpredictable lives, right? We have
Yep.
different buckets and different things that we're trying to balance.
Yeah.
Love for you to maybe speak a little bit about when we think about this topic of burnout and also this topic of the importance of self-care. I also want to talk about how do you really come to this place of figuring out a way to balance each thing that you're managing: family time, business
Hmm.
time, self-care, relationships, whatever that is. I would love for you to maybe speak a little bit about how do you find a good happy medium in there that helps you feel good and essentially helps you like, really tick the boxes on making sure you're taking care of all of these different facets of your life.
Yeah. So also really great question because I feel like balance is really different depending on your situation, depending on your work situation, your family situation, or whatever your household consists of. It looks a lot different, and society will make you think you have to have this pie chart with
Yeah.
everything perfectly divided up, which is
Right.
never the case for me. I
Yeah.
feel balanced and it is not a pie chart with like everything
Totally.
divided up equally by any
Yeah.
means. So for us in our family, so my family consists of I live with my husband and my 12-year-old son. We when we look at the calendar year, there's seasons that this last book launch was honestly extremely time consuming. It was fun and exciting, also highly time consuming. I had a conversation with my boys. I'm like, listen, guys, I love you so much, but this season right now is so busy, hectic. I love you, but it's going to be less family time. Like that's just what it is. I'm not writing a book every day, right? We'll get through the season. I'll be
Yeah.
available, but it's just with heavier projects, hey, there's not as much family time. There's also, for us, usually summer times, it's a little bit easier. We spend more family time. My son is always at some basketball tournament or another when he's in certain seasons. So we know it's a little bit busier for him. Or my husband has seasons of work where we know it's busier for him. So for us, our balance is different times of the year. We know it's hectic, busy. We just can't have as much family time. But other times, we're going to devote more family time during this season. And for us, that's our balance. And that works for us. Now,
Yeah.
I will say to people looking, this is something I always chuckle at. I will say for people looking for balance, the most important thing you want to recognize is for your household, whomever that consists of, does the balance work for your household? You will, I have gotten criticism from society, other people, or whomever. The most important thing that works for me is, does this work for me and my family? That's what's most highly important. And I
Right.
encourage people to think for them, as long as it's healthy, does that work for you? It may not look traditional and everyone else doesn't agree, but it's what works best for you and your household.
Right. And that's so good. Giving yourself the permission to
Oh,
evaluate
yeah.
your own household,
Yes.
your own lifestyle and your own
Yes.
goals and what feels good to you rather than
Yeah.
what society is trying to dictate. I think that is so good and just such a great reminder for all of us as we continue to evaluate this concept of balance because to your point, a perfect pie chart is not
Nope.
realistic. That's not
No.
real. And
No.
so I appreciate your perspective on that, especially from a mindset standpoint, because it's such a good way for us to really think through, you know, how do we achieve what feels good to us in a balanced way based on the seasons and the different expectations and responsibilities that we each individually have. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your perspective there. I think that is
Yeah.
just an incredibly important reminder for all of us. I would love to talk a little bit more about definition of success. And I think
Mm.
I'm so excited to read your book. I can't wait to dive into it and kind of learn more from a mindset standpoint about all of the things that you teach. But I'd love to talk about this definition of success since we kind of started the conversation speaking about, living in a society that's go, 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 more, more,
Yeah.
more. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to really learn time management and boundaries and, focusing on different buckets throughout the day. And that really does make a difference with your health. And
Yeah.
I'd love for you to maybe speak a little bit about how your definition of success has maybe evolved over time as you have put into practices your own mindset work and your own level of teachings that you're also teaching organizations and other people. How has that maybe shifted over time?
Yeah, that's so great. I feel like my definition of success has actually broadened over
Yeah.
time. And I think it's really easy, especially growing up, everything was about school. It was
Yeah.
just like school, work, achievement, trophy, award. Like it was so just very one-sided for a long time. But as
Yeah.
I've grown up, if you will, success looks like how is my family doing? How am I doing? How am I doing? And how is my family doing? And how's my community doing? And what am I doing to pour into community? How am I helping other people? How am I growing physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally? So it's really about growth to me and a lot of different areas of life. That to me for now is what success looks like. And it's not
Yeah.
just this one idea of, how are you doing at work or how's your company doing or your business doing. That's one part, yes, but it's also a much bigger picture, broader picture.
Yeah, broader picture, more of that like holistic approach, right?
Yes.
So I
Oh,
know
yes.
you talk a lot about holistic health and self-care
Yes.
instead of taking care of your wellness as an entrepreneur, someone working in business, et cetera. And it's
Yeah.
also this holistic mindset when you're thinking about how are we defining success,
Yeah.
right? Not only is it's so important to continue to evaluate what you may be achieving, but also like how do you feel inside the process? And to your
Yes.
point, how is your family doing? Like, how is
Yeah.
your personal wellness? How are you really truly feeling grounded in your day to day when you show up? I think it's just so powerful to hear that perspective because, to your point, so many of us, I'm sure, have been dictated this is
Yep.
what success is, right? This is the
Mhm.
line, this
Yeah.
is the path. And so many of us are getting into this season of questioning that and really redefining it for ourselves, which I think is so important.
Yeah, and the other great thing about when you make it success more holistic or just a broader definition, the reality is when it comes to our lives, there's just things that don't go the way we want them to go. And things fall apart, things are difficult, and it could be in one area of your life. But if you remember, there's a greater picture. So wherever that area is right now that you may be struggling with, then you look at the other areas and go, okay, but this area is going well, this area is going well, this one not so much,
Yeah.
this one not so much. But you can just really help yourself sometimes because sometimes we get stuck mentally on just so fixated on one aspect of success that may not be going well, but there's
Right.
all these other areas to consider.
That's so good. And a good honestly, even a good reminder for me because I think
Yeah.
we all do this as humans. We get super fixated on the thing we want to improve, the thing we
Yep.
want to grow, where we may be falling short, what we need to learn, instead of just taking a moment to say, like, these are my successes and I need to be celebrating that.
Yes.
This is how I need to keep refocusing to make sure that I'm really taking the time to look at what I am doing and what I have done as I'm continuing to work on this other bucket. So I love that you kind of
Yeah.
called that to attention because that mindset shift is huge for how we
Hmm.
feel as we show up. I'd love for you to kind of dive into speaking to the person that doesn't really know how to take these steps yet on the mindset side. Maybe they
Yeah.
are a busy mom, a busy entrepreneur. They're trying to balance relationships and work. They are trying to figure out, how do I even take care of my health in all of
Hmm.
this?
Yeah.
And they don't know where to start. Like, what would you say to that person? How would you coach them through this idea of trying to figure out, where do I start with trying to get to a place of feeling better and taking care of me inside all of this responsibility?
So I like to encourage people to think about 3 questions, ask themselves 3 questions often, preferably weekly. And that is, the first question is to say to yourself, how am I doing? Because a lot of times we're checking in with everyone else. There's nothing wrong with that, but also we're not connecting with ourselves to ask ourselves how we're doing. So, one, how am I doing? The second question is, what do I need physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally? And the third question is, what step do I need to take today to improve my life? And understanding that a lot of times we need to give ourselves grace. So sometimes we're in a season where we need to just take a baby step, starting to take a minute, 60 seconds out of your day to pause. Sometimes we're in a great season of momentum and we can take leaps, but it's most important that we're not judging ourselves and we start the journey, whatever it is it looks like. But it does start with connecting with yourself and being honest with yourself of how you're feeling, how you're doing, and then what is it that you need in this season of your life.
Such a good thing to reflect on, because every season really is so
Very
different.
different.
And
Yes.
I think we don't always give ourselves, we don't give ourselves enough grace through
No.
that. It's going to be different, and that's okay. So let's dive into talking a little bit more about just inside out wellness and mental and emotional well-being. So one of the things that I like to share and talk about a lot here on Empowered in Health and on my podcast is just the power of sharing our stories and sharing what's working for us and sharing the work that we're doing. I'd love to hear your perspective on why you feel like talking about our stories, getting on podcasts, writing books, why is that so powerful for all of us when it comes to
Yeah.
mental and emotional health?
Yeah, a lot of times, and this has been, I've met thousands and thousands of people at this point throughout my career, and we feel like we're alone sometimes in what we're going through, when the reality is a lot of our issues, a lot of our problems we're struggling with, there's millions of other people that are having the same issues, but we can really feel isolated, really feel alone in our struggles. So it is so important to be telling our stories, to be sharing that information with others. You can say, oh, I didn't know you hit burnout too. Oh, I didn't know you were struggling in this area of your life. And look, you got through. It's possible to get through. Those are really important. So I appreciate you too, just being a host and allowing people to share their stories and to hear things, to learn ways to be better. This is really it. This is the solution. Having these type of communities and these kind of conversations, because it really, really is possible to get through and to have the hope and the inspiration. But again, we do have to share and connect with each other. Like, the human connection is very powerful for us to have with each other.
It really is so powerful to have with each other. And I love that, because it just reminds us, when you're connecting and sharing stories, we give hope to others. We share
Yes.
our experiences, what we've learned, what they could learn. We help people understand they're not alone. That's so powerful. And one of the reasons I want you to share more about your most recent book that you just launched, which is amazing, would love for you to share a little bit about, kind of the book tour experience, maybe how you had to practice your own mindset work and self-care inside that, and really what the book is about.
Yeah, yeah. I chuckle because well, I believe God has a sense of humor. So this book, of course, this one with the
Yeah.
mindset training book, it was an interesting year. Throughout the year, there was just life was lifing. There's a lot of things happening, so I had to practice the things I wrote about with myself just to get through.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it was a very busy, hectic book process. However, this is actually my favorite book thus far that I've written, because it is about holistic self-care. It is about how do we grow physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And I try to share a little bit of my own journey in there, but also put practical things that we can do, because a lot of times people have asked me like, what do I do? Right? So it's like taking the minute, and it's about how do we work on our negative self-talk? How do we work on having gratitude? Like all those types of concepts and more, because it really can be life-saving. It's life-changing. It's the small steps that we take a lot of times that really have a huge impact in our lives. And we forget that a lot of times when it comes to mental health, but it really adds up in a beneficial way for our mental wellness.
Yes, it does. And I would love to hear, do you have in the book a favorite tip you share or a favorite practice you share? Or like if you were going to pick maybe the top thing that you wrote in there for people that really want to continue to work on their mindset, mental health, and really practicing this holistic health mindset shift, what would it be? What would you share?
Ooh, there's a couple. But one of them that I haven't already talked about on this podcast, one of them is really it's a journey about self-love sometimes, because sometimes we have worthiness issues, so we may not feel worthy that we deserve to be emotionally healthy, we
Right.
deserve to have joy, we deserve to have inner peace. That in and of itself sometimes for some of us is a process. So that's one of the things that I loved in the book.
Yeah.
Personally, also, I used to have very negative self-talk. We all have negative self-talk, but there's degrees to it. Mine
Yeah.
was very harsh, which it's a whole journey, but I had to really recognize that and change the way that I was even talking to myself, because that was never a way I would talk to someone else. So why
Right.
would you talk to yourself like that? But that's in there as well, just how to have that journey to have more positive self-talk, and more self-love. So those are just a couple of my favorite things in there, because again, very life-changing work when we do the inner work that we need to be better individuals for ourselves and for the people around us.
Yeah. The inner work. And I mean, you're hitting my heart right now on worthiness
Yeah.
and negative self-talk. I think we all, like you hit the nail on the head, we all have
Yeah.
those components to our story. We
Yes.
all feel that in some aspect of our life at some point in our life for some reason or another, whether it's an old story or something somebody said one time or something we've made up. Like
Yeah.
that's really important to start to recognize,
Yeah.
right? And I love that you really speak on that, which is one of the reasons I'm super excited to dive into your book and excited for you to kind of share more about how people can get connected to you. So before we wrap up, Dr. Hammond, I'd love for you to share a little bit about how can people find you, how can people connect with you, talk a little bit about your work and how they can learn more about just what you're doing.
Yeah. The easiest way to find me is my website, which is drnekeshahammond.com, DRNEKESHIA Hammond.com, or on social media platforms, Dr. Nekeisha Hammond. And the work I do, so I work with organizations and corporations to help solve the problem of burnout prevention. On the speaking side, I also have a private practice where I do psychological evaluations, and of course, write books. So spending a lot of time in helping people manage their mental wellness, because again, there's so much we can do to prevent a lot of heartache and pain. So I'm elated to be in this space and just continue the journey.
I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. It's so needed on so many levels for so many people. And it's just incredible what you're doing with sharing the message and diving into service in this way. And it's so powerful. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective, your story, the amazing book you just launched. We will have, or I will have in the show notes of this podcast, all of the details on how you can get connected to Dr. Hammond and all of her amazing resources. Really quickly, before we wrap up, I love to ask this as a question before everybody kind of signs off of my podcasts. And that's this concept of a favorite quote or a favorite mindset mantra or just something that helps you really get grounded in this concept of I have to take care of me, right? Taking care of me and my self-care matters. And I need to repeat this thing to myself so I know that I can have the will and feel empowered to do that. I'd love to know if you have a favorite quote or something you'd like to share.
Yeah, my favorite mantra that I live by now is keep going, keep growing.
So good. I love that. Simple,
Yes.
straightforward, and a good reminder for all of us. Keep growing. Keep
Yes.
going and keep growing because when you keep going, you're Forced to kind of grow, right?
Yeah.
Forced to kind of grow. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Dr. Hammond, thank you again for your time. So
Thank you.
grateful for you. We'll see you in the next one.